4th grade by Miss Carmina. Open your book, page 102 of your awesome reader. Finding Shelter, adapted by Paola Molina, illustrated by Miguel Macias. For days, everyone had been talking about the storm. At first, no one was sure whether Hurricane Dolly would really come toward Louisiana. But then, the weather reporter announced that the storm would reach Louisiana in about 2 days. Adam paused in the middle of filling the dog's food bowl. Sarge was an enormous reddish-brown mutt with floppy ears and a long nose. Sarge rolled and stared at his bowl as he waited for Adam to continue pouring the food. Even if that hurricane hits Louisiana, our time will be safe, right? Adam asked, looking at his father. I mean, Oakville isn't right on the coast. The beach is 2 towns away. Adam's sister, Kate, rolled her eyes. Kate was 12, and lately she seemed to think she knew everything. Don't they have science class in 5th grade, Adam? Kate teased. Hurricanes are huge. Its effects will probably reach us too. I knew that, Adam snapped. Suddenly, he felt anxious. He had heard about hurricanes at school. There had been a really bad one in Texas last year. He remembered newspaper pictures of houses ripped apart by the wind. His science teacher said that the wind had reached 150 miles per hour. Let's not get all worked up now, said Adam's father, Mr. Collins, switching up the television. Hurricane Dolly is a Category 2 hurricane. The strongest hurricanes are Category 5. Dolly is a very powerful storm and we need to respect it. But with some careful planning, we can stay safe. The school was cancelled the next day. Mr. and Mrs. Collins also stayed home. Mrs. Collins helped Kate and Adam find a government website about hurricanes. They printed out a list of things to do to prepare for the storm. Then, Mrs. Collins headed for the grocery store. Kate and Adam helped Mr. Collins move the outdoor furniture into the garage. They didn't want the wind to blow it away. They even holded the grill and the garbage cans. When Mrs. Collins returned home with the groceries, Adam and Kate helped her carry in the bags. Adam saw canned food, crackers, peanuts, butter, and an enormous bag of Sarge's favorite dog food. Mrs. Collins carried him a jug after jug of water. Why so much water? Asked Kate, having a jug into the counter. The wind will probably knock down the trees and power lines around here. We may lose electricity, Mrs. Collins began. The water in your house comes from a well. An electric pump pushes the well water into the house. Without electricity, we won't have water. We will need to use bottled water instead. I guess we'll need this for our flashlights, said Adam, pulling an enormous pack of batteries from a bag. The thought of flashlights reminded Adam of a camping trip. It just didn't seem possible that a hurricane could be on its way towards Oakville. I heard some news at the grocery store, said Mrs. Collins. The town is setting up a shelter out of your school. The police plan to evacuate the island and the towns along the coast tomorrow. Evacuate? Asked Adam. That's when the government tells people they have to leave their homes during an emergency, explained Kate. Right, said Mrs. Collins. Hurricanes cause very high tides called storm surges. The storm surge will probably flood the island and beach towns. At breakfast the next day, the sky was cloudy. The weather reporter announced that Hurricane Dolly would hit land around 9:30 that evening. Well, we're as ready as we can, said Mrs. Collins. Let's go down and see if we can help at the shelter for a few hours. At the school cafeteria, the Collins helped sign people in as they arrived. There were a few families with kids and many older people. They carried overnight bags packed with clothes. Some had bags of photo albums and other treasures they wanted to keep safe from the storm. At around 10 o'clock, a whining nose caught Adam's attention. He looked toward the glass cafeteria doors. A small boy stood outside the doors with his family. He held a shaggy tan puppy, which was whining to be let down. The boy was crying. Adam grabbed Kate's arm and pointed to the doors. "I'm sorry," the manager of the shelter said. "Animals are not allowed here. You will have to leave the dog somewhere else." The puppy wouldn't be safe there. All their friends had left home too. They had nowhere to leave the puppy. "Kate, what are we going to do?" He looked at Kate, half expecting her to roll her eyes at him again. Instead, Kate found it. "You're right, Adam. Come on." They ran over their parents. Mr. and Mrs. Collins were watching the discussion by the floor too. Mr. Collins whispered something to Mrs. Collins. She nodded and stood up. Together, they walked over the people by the doors. "Maybe we could help," Mr. Collins began. By noon, the Collins house looked like a small pet shop. They will be caring for Cody, the tan puppy, 3 cats, a parrot, a hamster, and a lizard named Uncle Frank. Sarge happily sniffed at each other near arrival, especially the puppy. "I think we've hit our limit," said Mr. Collins. He sat down a bag of pet supplies by Frank's cage. "There's a law that says that estates must have a disaster plan for pets. There must be a pet shelter nearby." An hour later, Mr. Collins had found 2 local kennels and an animal hospital that were sheltering animals from the storm. He called his crew to share the news. Adam and Kate spent the rest of the day helping their father transport animals from the school to the pet shelters. They made sure that the owners could be matched with their pets after the storm. Kate took a photo of each pet with its owner. Adam wrote down the owner's instructions and addresses. By the time they returned home, it was raining very hard. No one got much sleep that night. Mrs. Collins had spread their sleeping bags in the dining room. They were in the center of the house, away from any windows. The animals sat in their cages and travel crates all around the room. Mr. Collins kept his small battery-powered weather radio turned into get some news of the hurricane. Outside, the wind howled and rattled the windows. Rain pounded on the roof. A loud crack told them a tree branch had broken nearby. Around 11 o'clock, the lights blinked and then went out. For a while, Kate and Adam tried singing songs to drown out the frightening racket. They invented silly versions of Old MacDonald Had a Farm and On Top of a Spaghetti. The singing was no use, really. Adam curled up beside Sarge. The noise of the storm seemed to get louder and louder. Cody, the tan puppy, whined with fear. Kate rocked the pup gently. Adam could see that even Kate was scared. Suddenly, an enormous crash shook the house. Adam thought the wind had torn up the roof. Mr. Collins jumped to his feet. When nothing more happened, he sat back down. "Probably just a tree down," he said. "It sounded like it would hit the garage. We'll see in the morning." Gradually, the wind and the rain grew quieter. Adam looked at Kate. She had fallen asleep with the puppy in her arms. Adam wondered if a tree had really landed on his house, and if the people at the shelter still had houses at all. He squeezed down from under Sarge, who was snoring softly. He peeked into the cat crates, and then into the other cages. Frank was the only animal still awake. "We made it," Adam whispered, "lizards and all.